This video is brought to you by Brilliant.
One of Trump's more eye-catching policies this election season was his pledge to deport every single illegal immigrant in the US. While some people dismiss this as hyperbolic campaign rhetoric, Trump's pick of immigration hardliner Stephen Miller as his deputy chief of staff and former ICE director Tom Homan as his border czar suggests both that he's serious and that immigration is going to be a policy priority for the new administration. So in this video, we're going to take a look at Trump's plan to deport millions of undocumented migrants, what the American public thinks of it, and whether it will actually work.
Before we start, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing and ringing the bell to stay in the loop and be notified when we release new videos.
So to understand how Trump got elected with a majority of the popular vote on a platform that includes deporting millions of people, you need a bit of context. Unlike most other developed countries, the US has always had a large population of people living in the country illegally. According to estimates by the Pew Research Center, this population grew from about 3.5 million in 1990 to a peak of about 12.2 million in 2007, before falling to about 11 million in 2015. In mid-2022, Pew estimated it was at 11 million again, having risen from a low of 10.2 million during the pandemic. This number includes people who have entered the country without notifying the authorities, people who have had an asylum claim rejected but continue to live in the US, and people who are waiting to have their asylum claim processed, or are under some other sort of temporary protection scheme. This last group accounts for about 3 million people, and while they are technically in the US illegally, they can't be deported under current laws. Anyway, despite this remarkably large number, Americans have historically expressed generally positive views towards immigration, and Democrats have been able to win elections campaigning on impressively liberal immigration policies. However, in the past few years or so, public opinion has swung dramatically. According to Gallup polling, the share of Americans wanting the level of all immigration to decrease has shot up from 28% in 2020 to 55% in June 2024, the highest figure since 2001, when anti-immigration sentiment shot up after 9/11. A similar fraction of Americans now describe immigration as a critical threat to the US. And while Republicans are still way more likely than Democrats to cite immigration as the main problem facing the US, the swing in sentiment against more immigration has occurred among Democrats, Republicans, and independents. In this context, it shouldn't come as a total surprise that most Americans now favor some pretty hardline immigration policies. A majority of Americans now favor building the US-Mexico border wall, and 47% apparently support Trump's stated policy of deporting all undocumented migrants back to their home country. So why has public opinion swung so dramatically? Well, it might be in part down to Trump's focus on the issue, or its prevalence as a topic on social media, but it's probably mostly to do with the fact that the number of migrants coming into the US illegally has skyrocketed recently. While the US doesn't measure the exact number of border crossings, the number of so-called encounters between border agents and unauthorized migrants at the southern border, widely treated as a proxy for the total number of migrants arriving at the border, has increased dramatically under Biden. Having averaged about 40,000 for most of the 2010s, under Biden the monthly number of encounters averaged about 170,000, peaking at 250,000 in December 2023. Why this number jumped so dramatically is much debated. Republicans blame Biden's soft border policies, like his decision to reverse Trump's controversial Remain in Mexico policy, while Democrats blame geopolitical instability in South America and a post-pandemic backlog. Anyway, these numbers got so large that even the Democrats accepted it was a problem, which is why they tried to negotiate a bipartisan border bill last year, only for Senate Republicans to block it in May 2024 at Trump's direction. Biden reacted by instead issuing a series of executive orders, and the number of encounters duly fell to a post-pandemic low of 58,000 in August. Nonetheless, even if the number of encounters has now fallen, this still means that the total number of undocumented migrants has almost definitely increased a fair bit from that 11 million estimate in mid-2022, and this is who Trump wants to deport. Now, this wouldn't happen all in one go. J.D. Vance, for instance, suggested that the administration would, quote, start with 1 million, while Trump's new border czar, former ICE director Tom Homan, has suggested they would first focus on migrants who had committed crimes. So, will this actually happen? Well, there are a fair few hurdles. Leaving aside the difficult optics of deporting millions of people, including people who've lived in the US for years, it's not clear that it would be legal. When Trump and his advisors talk about their mass deportation policy, they cite two laws. the Insurrection Act, which would allow Trump to use the military to secure the southern border, and the Alien Enemies Act, which allows the president to unconditionally deport non-citizens from, quote, enemy nations. Both of these laws would probably be challenged in the courts. Invoking the Insurrection Act might contradict an 1878 law known as posse comitatus, which requires the president to seek congressional approval when using the military to enforce domestic policies. And the Alien Enemies Act is only supposed to apply during wartime. Second, it would be expensive. The US currently doesn't have the administrative capacity to pull this off. There are only about 45,000 beds available in detention centers at the moment, and there's already a deportation backlog of about 1.3 million people. Even with support from the military, ramping up deportations this drastically would require building an entirely new infrastructure and cost billions of dollars. CBS Analysis estimates that deporting just 1 million people could cost about $20 billion, while the American Immigration Council estimates that deporting every undocumented migrant would cost more than $300 billion, although that's including the impact on labor markets and the loss to the taxpayer from the deportation of immigrants who pay taxes but don't receive benefits. Third, Trump's plan will probably require cooperation from state police and other authorities, but Democrats in places like New York and California have already signaled that they would resist deportation efforts by the federal government. But perhaps the biggest hurdle is that deportations require cooperation from countries of origin, who have to willingly receive these deportees. While Trump has suggested he would force states to take their citizens back by threatening things like massive tariffs, some countries will presumably refuse. China, for instance, has already refused to take back deported citizens and will already be suffering from enormous tariffs anyway, while other countries just won't be able to. Haiti, for instance, doesn't have a functioning state to receive thousands of deportees. Now, as a TLDR viewer, it's clear that you have a thirst for learning. After all, why else would you have watched a 10-minute video explaining Trump's mass deportations plan? But if you want to continue your learning journey, you should really check out our sponsor, Brilliant. Brilliant is the online learning platform where you learn by doing, with thousands of interactive lessons in maths, data analysis, programming, and AI. These hands-on lessons have you comparing circuits to understand voltage and current, playing snooker to learn the rules of collision, planning your itinerary for an intergalactic music festival on a space-time diagram, and more. That way, you'll build up your natural intuition while gaining deep knowledge of scientific principles. In fact, Brilliant actually recently launched tons of new data science content, all of which uses real-world data to help you see trends and make better informed decisions. And don't worry, you don't need to be a world-renowned scientist to understand these courses either. Brilliant's courses are designed for learners of any level. So to find out more and to try everything Brilliant has to offer for free for a full 30 days, visit brilliant.org/TLDR or click the link in the description. You'll also get 20% off an annual premium subscription. Thanks for your support, and thanks to Brilliant for sponsoring this video.